Hello, and welcome back to Key to Lights here on Princeton Community Television. I'm Misha.
I'm Rachel.
And here with us today, we have Steve Besserman. He is the chief storyteller at AriJoe Productions, and he is the author of this fabulous and stunning documentary about his parents' experience in the Holocaust. And also, before we jump into our first question, I'd just like to say that Jenny, our third leg of the stool, she is not here today because she has previous engagements. So that's why she's not here.
Now to the interview. So, when you were a child, did you always knew that your parents were part of the Holocaust? Like, how did you find out about the story?
Well, I found out about the stories at a very young age. I would say, when I was 4 or 5 years old was the first time I was hearing the stories, mostly from my mother. My father was pretty quiet about it. He was one of the survivors that preferred to, keep it suppressed because he had lost so much and it was a very painful experience for him. And he couldn't bring himself to talk about it. But my mother was very vocal about her experiences, and as a child, the Holocaust explained a lot about my family. I mean, first and foremost, my parents had numbers tattooed on their arms, so being as inquisitive as children are, she truthfully answered my questions about why she had a number on her arm, and it was also the explanation for why I didn't have grandparents, and because they were lost to my family in the Holocaust. So I did learn about it directly from my mother, and she would tell many stories about what happened to her prior to the Holocaust in terms of her growing up and when the Nazis invaded her country, which was Hungary. My mom was from Hungary, and my dad was from Poland. And she would also tell me some things about what happened to her during the Holocaust and how she lost her mother. She was separated from her mother, and together with her sisters, she was in the camp. So it just was a way of communicating my family history to me at the same time as learning about the atrocities and the horrors that occurred for a lot of people during that time.
So when did you decide to tell your parents' story?
Well, people have often asked me how long it took me to make the film, and I tell them more than 35 years because that's when it really began. My mom, again, would always tell my sister and I these stories of her experience, and it was when I was in my 20s that I went to visit my parents with my wife. I was newlywed, and my mom had taken to performing this language exercise. She wanted to improve her written English. And she spoke with a very thick accent, but she spoke English very well. But her writing was a little bit hampered by the lack of education that she had. She only went to school up until about the 6th grade, but she would write notes and things in what I called Hunglish. It was kind of English letters with Hungarian intonations and things, and she wanted to improve that. So the way she did was she would take a dictionary and she would look up words that she was unfamiliar with, and then she would write the words down and spell them correctly, and then write their definitions, and then she would try to use the words in a paragraph, like a diary entry. And so on this visit to my parents one day, many years ago, my mom came over and proudly displayed her work for me in a spiral notebook, and I looked down, and on one side of the page was this list of words, and on the other side of the page was a paragraph using those words. And it was a very mundane entry. She had gone to a store with one of her sisters, one of my aunts, but she saw something on the shelf in the store that reminded her of an experience that she had in the Auschwitz concentration camp. And there were these 3 sentences that just sort of captured the story. And I was familiar with the story because I had heard her tell me that before. But somehow seeing it written on the page, it was very powerful for me. And my mom very innocently came up to me. She wasn't aware that I was reacting to that. You know, she was just proud of this exercise that she had accomplished. And she said, well, what do you think of my work? And I said, well, Mom, this is terrific, you know, first and foremost. But when I read these 3 sentences about your experience in Auschwitz, it makes me want to ask you to do something that's going to be very difficult. It's going to be difficult physically because it's going to be a lot of work for you, but it's going to be difficult emotionally because what I would really want to have and treasure for my children when I have them and their children when they have them is you capturing all of your experiences of what it was like for a young girl growing up in Hungary and how you experienced the Holocaust when the Nazis invaded your country and took your life away, and how you met my father and how you came to America, and etc. It would really be a treasure for me to do that. And she just sort of stopped for a moment and nodded and didn't really say anything. And then when I came back 6 weeks later, she came into the room and handed me 6 notebooks filled on both sides of the page with all of her memories. And they weren't in a you know, the sequence of how things happen, but it just, you know, sort of came to her in stream of consciousness, and she wrote all of these memories down. And it was at that moment that I knew that I was going to have to find a way to share the story. But the notion of doing it as a documentary came to me many years later. My mom was diagnosed with dementia, a form of Alzheimer's, and she began to lose her memories. And that, coupled with some inspiration that I took from other films that I have seen and other books that I had read, led me to making the documentary by going back and using the words from her diary to tell the story and visiting and capturing all of those places today while unveiling some of the memories from the past. So that's a very long-winded answer for answering your question, but that's how the film should be.
And in the Holocaust, well, from your mother's story, what do you think made Auschwitz like the worst prison camp in the Holocaust?
Yeah, that's a good question. I don't know if it was the worst part of her experience. It was all horrible. She was actually in Auschwitz twice, and if I did pinpoint an instance where Auschwitz would have been the most horrible for her and the worst part of her experience for 2 reasons, probably. The first time she was in Auschwitz, I mean, that was the first time that she was, after spending some time in the ghettos, I mean, here she was transported to this insane world where, you know, she'd lost her life, she'd lost her identity. Upon arrival at Auschwitz, her and her sisters were separated from their mother. Her mother was led off, she did not know at the time, but her mother was led off to the gas chambers and the crematorium and murdered. But she was separated from her mother. She began with, you know, being beaten and tortured and starved, and so it was being thrust into this, you know, just this madness. So that was the first time. The second time she was in Auschwitz, after having been shipped off to another camp, which was actually the camp that was depicted in Schindler's List, Plaszow in Krakow, Germany. And then she was there for about 6 or 8 weeks, and then they were transported back to Auschwitz. And the second time she was in Auschwitz, she had her own encounter with Dr. Mengele, who they referred to as the Angel of Death. He was a doctor. And he would stand and have lines of the prisoners come before him, and he would look them over and determine who he thought was healthy enough to work, so they would be sent to the right, or if they were sickly or older or of no use to the Nazis, he would send them to the left. And that meant that you were going to the gas chamber and the crematorium and you would be immediately executed. And my mom's sisters were sent to the right and she was sent to the left. And it was only due to a circumstance of some commotion that was going on that she was able to escape and reunite with her sisters that was putting them on a train, taking them to yet another camp and work in a factory and things like that. So it was a very, very narrow escape. So that's why I would say that Auschwitz was the worst for her. First, because her first time there was just that initial thrust into madness, and the second time was a narrow escape from death.
So going back, trying to find all of this stuff to put into your documentary, was it hard to put together, hard to get all the information?
That's a good question. It wasn't hard per se. I mean, hard in the sense that it took a lot of effort. I mean, my mother's post facto diary was truly a treasure because it really was, her experience, and she very well organized way captured what happened in which place and where that was located, and so that enabled me to really perform pretty organized research and contact people in those areas of Poland and Germany and Hungary, and literally set up a situation where I could trace her footsteps, so to speak, and then walk in those footsteps and go there. So I had a contact in each country that was helping me go to those places in advance and send me photographs so that when I got there, I knew exactly where I was going and what was most relevant to my mom's situation and her story at the time. So I started with her hometown and where she was born and raised, and then all of the ghettos and campsites that she had been placed in.
Did you ever wanted to get your dad's side of the story?
Yes, and I did as best I could from my mom. The film is very much from my mom's words, and I always wanted to keep her voice, which was very evident in the way she wrote her experiences. She helped me actually capture my dad's story because when they fell in love through a barbed wire fence and then were married after their liberation, she got to know a lot about what my father had experienced and what his family life was like growing up, and so I got my dad's story from my mom, and then he would later on corroborate and expand on the things that happened to him. So I feel like I did get my story, and since I made the film, my father's been a lot more vocal about some of the details of his story. But his story is kind of summarized in the film by my mom.
So, some people believe that the Holocaust never happened. Why do you think this is?
Well, unfortunately, you're always going to find people that are either denying out of guilt or denying because they want to justify their own prejudices and their own hatred, and they want to sort of, denounce things that, that really prove their culpability and their guilt. So certainly people who had participated, you hear things all the time where they discover that somebody was a Nazi guard or a Nazi soldier, and they're trying to bring them to justice after all these many years, and they'll deny it, because it makes them guilty. I think others are just blinded by prejudice and hatred and ignorance, and now there's just so much evidence, all around the world with the museums, the artifacts, the films that have been captured, the stories that have been told, and that it's just asinine for anybody to deny it. I mean, I think they look pretty foolish and ignorant to deny something that exists. It's like denying something else in history, saying Pearl Harbor never happened, or it's just ridiculous.
Speaking of Nazi gods on trial, what about this recent trial in Germany where a 90-year-old Nazi is going to go on trial?
Yeah.
Even at his age.
Right. Well, what do you think?
I am not sure.
I'm not sure what to think either.
Yeah, I mean, people were, guilty of very heinous, heinous crimes, and if they were responsible for other people's torture and death, and is there a statute of limitations on taking lives and torturing people and just following orders, so to speak? I don't know. I think you carry your guilt with you through life,
So it's definitely important to keep this story alive. So how do you keep this story alive and so true?
Yeah, well, that was really a key objective of mine with the film. The first thing I wanted to do was really do it for myself and my family. So that was, it was just something that I was carrying around with me for many, many years, and I just needed to find a way. And with my experience and training, and I'd like to think talent in filmmaking, that became the way that I would share my parents' story. But the next most important objective for me was to share the story with as many people as possible, so that I can contribute to the vast library of facts and information that prove what happened to people, and to tell it in a very personal way. And particularly, I was concerned about young people and getting in front of as many young people as I could. So that's why I am very proud and thrilled that through the New Jersey Commission on Holocaust Education, I donated many copies of the DVD and a study guide that my younger son wrote that is geared toward for educators to how they should share the film, and some questions they can ask students after they've seen the film to sort of provoke some thinking and internalizing of the story, but what it means in the grander scheme of things, and the danger of prejudice and the dangers of hatred when carried to an extreme. So the film and the study guide is now distributed to all middle and high schools in New Jersey via the commission, and I've shown it to many classes. I've been the guest lecturer at universities and shown the film and talked about it, and it's been at film festivals, and it's been on public television, so I've tried to get it out there as much as I can. And by now, many thousands of people have seen the film and know the story, and so it is important to keep it alive. And I encourage everyone who has a story to capture it in whatever way they can, whether it's in a book or letters, or however they want, or telling the story verbally, or recording their grandparents, or. So I really do encourage everybody to do that.
And so are there any other stories that you plan to tell, like the Japanese internment camps or the Armenian genocide that I think happened in Russia, which was similar to this with all the slave camps and the, starving and freezing to death in Serbia?
Yeah. There are a lot of there are a lot of stories and a lot of atrocities that have come into the mainstream, thankfully, and I don't have any plans on telling those stories, unless somebody wants to. Needs help in telling their stories and wants to engage me to help them tell their story, then I would consider doing that. But it was important for me to tell my parents' story because their story is my story. It's my family story. I am helping other people tell their stories that may not have anything to do with the Holocaust or genocides or. But I'm kind of a humanist at heart, so I find people's stories very interesting, and I recently completed a short documentary called Bunny about a woman. At the time, she was turning 97 when I filmed her. This July, God bless her, she should be turning 99. And she had a very interesting life. Her husband, who died about 25 years ago, was a World War II hero. He was in World War II. He was on the beach at Normandy, and he got a Purple Heart. And she had a very interesting life. She was a bit of a performer and a dancer and a singer, and so I just found her story particularly interesting. So I made that film, Bunny, and I'm trying to do that for people that want to tell their stories and interesting stories in this video documentary storytelling that I do. But it was my film, Only a Number, about my parents that started AriJoe Productions.
So tell us about AriJoe Productions.
Okay. What a segue, huh?
Yeah.
I started AriJoe Productions for the purpose of producing Only a Number. It's named AriJoe because my mother's name was Aranka, but everybody called her Ari, and my father was Joseph, and everybody called him Joe. So I made the company AriJoe Productions. But since making the film, I've expanded AriJoe Productions to employ this approach to video documentary storytelling for small to mid-sized businesses that have a story to tell, for nonprofit organizations. I did a piece for Homefront, if you're familiar with the Homefront organization that provides, homes and shelter and food for people who are homeless in central New Jersey. And then I made Bunny, which is an example of a film for people who are interested in sharing their family histories and capturing those for their own families and to share with friends. And so those are the kinds of short documentaries that I'm making now. And that's what AriJoe Productions is all about, helping people tell their stories.
Well, that's super important. I watched this video once. My English teacher, she showed me it, but we call it IRLA class. So my IRLA teacher, she showed us a video of a lady who was determined to have Holocaust education in the city where she lived, where they didn't have it. So she went around, she interviewed people on campus and asked them questions about the Holocaust, and nobody knew anything except for the people from New Jersey and the area around here. So it's super, so she got the education for where she lived, and she wrote a book about her mother's experience, just like you documented your parents' experience. So I think it's super important to do this to let people know, because it's important to know your history.
I agree. Yeah, and I'm familiar with that woman. She was from Philadelphia,
Yeah,
right? And
yeah.
it was Pennsylvania that she was trying to get that in. Yeah, she was on YouTube, and yeah, kudos to her for getting that accomplished. Yeah, there are several states that require it now, but several more that need to do it. But if people would want a copy of Only a Number, like I've given to you,
Yes.
Misha and Rachel, they can go to onlyanumber.com. My website for AriJoe Productions is arijoe.com, but at onlyanumber.com you can order a DVD if it's something that you'd like to put in your library.
And do you have any last words that you want to share with the audience?
Well, I just think that I want to congratulate you both and Jenny too, in absentia, for having such a great program and having great guests on your program. I've seen a couple of your programs, and I think it's great to be part of Princeton Community Television. And there's a lot of stories out there, and in a way, you're helping tell those stories too. So congratulations.
Thank you. And
Thank you.
It's important to have kids now.
For sure.
Yeah. So, I think, are we the only teen show on the station right now?
Yes.
Yay. 5 teens and 4 teens. That used to be our motto.
That's good. Good motto.
Yeah. Well, anyway, I'd just like to say thank you so much for
coming on the show.
yeah.
Thank
it
you for
was
having me.
super interesting story and amazing work here. And I really love the name too. It totally gets. Yeah.
Right. My mother's choice for the title because in the film and in her diary and in life, she would always say that she said we were only a number. We weren't even considered to be human beings. The Nazis just, branded us, and then that was our only identity. We were only a number.
Well, perfect name, and thank you so much for coming.
Thanks for having me.
Documenting how you documented something else, which is very important.
Excellent. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
My parents, Joseph and Aranka, are survivors of the Holocaust, and I learned at a very early age what that meant.
Can you read the number? 1785558.
My mother has dementia, and many years before this insidious disease began to eat away at her memories, a simple self-taught language exercise led to the memoir she wrote and created the resulting diary that was the story of how my parents met, how they fell in love, and what my mom endured during the Holocaust. My mother can no longer tell her story, so I decided to do it by following the path of her journey in the present and looking for the remnants of her past. It is a true story of the struggle to survive, to love, and to remember.
One morning, as I went to work in the city, I saw some strange-looking soldiers. I asked my boss who these soldiers were, and he told me that we were under German occupation. Jewish people had to obey the new laws set down by the Germans. The yellow star, which had to be displayed prominently on our outer clothing, was only the beginning. We were not permitted on the streets of the city during curfew hours, and people became afraid for their lives and those of their families. We were marched out of the Hot One ghetto to the train. All of the Jews were loaded onto the cattle cars. I cannot tell you how many people were squeezed into one car.